Hi, everyone. I'm Julie, and welcome back to the YMyHealth Podcast. Today, we are doing some very special in-person episodes at Fight CRC for Call on Congress here in March. And today, I have Antonio Dionizio. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
Perfect.
perfect.
He is the co-founder and VP of Champions for Colorectal Cancer, and he is also, or was also, the caregiver for a father who had cancer and is now in remission. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Excellent.
Over 20 years.
Over 20 years. So amazing. Um, we find that a lot of our listeners are, both caregivers and patient survivors. In today's episode, we're really talking about caregiving. So I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about what this really looked like back in 2003 when your father was first diagnosed. What was that day like?
I mean, it was obviously a long time ago, so it's hard to
Yeah.
really remember everything, but my father hadn't been feeling well for a while. And I think as is the norm a lot, people, doctors have a tendency to, say it's one thing, say it's another. And so, for a while he hadn't been feeling himself. They did diagnose him with Lyme. And so they thought a lot of it was just, a lot of his pains, joints, and things was related to the Lyme. And it very well may have been. But I do remember that, when he went to, the particular doctor that was like, you know what, why don't we get you checked with like an MRI? So we were like kind of anxious, but like we didn't really know what to expect. We
Yeah.
didn't know they were going to say, hey, you have stage 3 colorectal cancer. I think at the time it was just, hey, you have, colorectal cancer. We want to get you in. And then they determined it was stage 3 later on. But I guess just hearing the words cancer scares you,
Yeah.
scared me. I was younger, right? I was in my 20s, just had graduated college, just had started my first job out of college. So like I had my whole life ahead of me. And, my father was towards the end of his career. He was 63 when he got diagnosed. So he was thinking about retirement. He had just him and my mom had just bought a house in Florida. They weren't planning on moving for a couple years. So it was like all that going on at once. And so like thinking back, just that day was, like a whirlwind of emotions, whirlwind of thoughts. What's going to happen? How do I focus on my job? How do I focus on supporting my dad and his journey? So, um, yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
emotions.
Yeah. I have to imagine that it's, overwhelming at that point. And I was looking online on your website, reading a little bit about you and your dad, and it sounded like before your dad's diagnosis, rather, um, there was, he'd done so much. He was an immigrant, but he was also working construction. Like he sounded just like overall like a really strong, resilient person. And so I was curious what this diagnosis meant, like to your family and your view of your dad in that way.
Um, I don't know why I always get emotional at this point, but
Yeah.
like, you know, he came here in the 70s from Portugal, didn't have anything. Um, and so like I guess my view has always been that like he gave up everything to provide, right? So it just I never, even though I'm crying, I never saw my dad cry. Like he was just always like a tough, he's short in stature. He's like, 5'6", 5'7", but like he was just always so tough. I mean, he was in the army in Portugal. That's where
Mm.
he immigrated from.
Yeah.
He was a police officer in Portugal, and then he left everything behind. His family, he didn't have family here or anything. He came here, you know, um, and he actually started as a baker. I guess like his village in Portugal is well known for, people producing bread and stuff. So that's what he was doing. And then I don't know how he just went into construction right around the time I was born. Maybe just felt like that was, for someone that doesn't really have an education, that's a great way to make good money
Yeah.
and fast. So, he was always getting up at like 5 in the morning and just going to work. And, he'd come home dirty and just like, immediately go out and we had chickens growing up and stuff, like go out there, feed the chickens, tend to his huge garden, cut the lawn, chop wood, like the traditional, like, I guess what you consider like manly things. So like that was my view of him always growing up.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like, even though again he was 63, he didn't look 63. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like we joke all the time, especially now that he lives in Florida, that like my dad is like so like dark complexion. I mean, obviously now in Florida, but like even when he was here, because he was always outside doing these things, these tasks that he didn't want really like my mom doing or, my siblings or anything like that. Like he just felt like it was his duty.
Yeah.
So, again, that image of him and now seeing like, A, am I going to have my father for much longer? Because you never know, right? Unfortunately. And then B, also just seeing, especially like when he was going through treatment, like, oh my God, like he's starting to get really frail. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, there's so much about that that's hard, right? But for you personally, what was the hardest part during those years?
I think the not knowing, right? So, like, if you think back, to that time, it's a lot different than now. There was really no I mean, there was internet, but, like, there wasn't the amount of resources, available, right? So, like, you couldn't just go on Google. I don't even think Google was
Right.
around. Um, you know, I think the big search engine was, like, Yahoo or something, but, like, you couldn't really go on and, like, research and, like, hundreds of resources pop up or hundreds of articles you can read about or, now with AI, you don't even need to, like, scroll. It just gives you everything? So that wasn't available, so, like, not knowing, and I have 2 older siblings. One is actually 15 years older than me, so she was, what I would consider the primary caregiver
Sure.
because, educated, well-educated, speaks English, whereas, my parents, my dad has, like, a 4th or 5th grade education in Portugal, you know what I mean? And then he was out in the fields tending the field. So, like, didn't really, like, believe in that when he was growing up. So, while he does his best, English is not his primary
Right.
language, right? So, I joke with people, he speaks, like, broken Portuguese English, right? But, like, for me, I think because I had my sister doing everything, it was a little bit different because I wasn't the one in the front lines. I wasn't the
Sure.
one going to every doctor appointment and having to translate to my father and stuff. Kind of relied on my sister a little bit more, which,
Yeah.
looking back, I do wish I was more involved, only
Mhm.
because I think it's because now how involved I am in my advocacy, and now I understand a lot of the lingo, and I see friends that are going through, what they're going through.
Yeah.
I don't understand everything, right? But I understand a lot more now than I did when I was in my 20s.
Sure. And I think, it's something that I can't imagine that beyond knowing somebody who's gone through this or having friends who have gone through this that you can really feel 100%, but, you know, did you feel prepared for that role at all? Was there anything that you had advanced knowledge of that you felt like could support in any way?
Not really. If I think back to it, just like, you know, I knew some people that had other types of cancer, friends, parents and stuff that went through either like breast cancer or lung cancer. But like, I think anytime back then when you heard the word cancer, you always just thought, this is it. This
Right.
is how that person's going to pass away. Um, it was just the stigma back then.
Totally. And what do you think people maybe misunderstand about caregiving?
Um, I think that like when people think of like being a caregiver, they think of like that person, like, taking them to and from appointments, and, like, that's it, or, like, the person that's at home giving them baths because they can't, or, bringing them to the bathroom or whatever it may be, like, it's a lot more than just like that. The people that I mean, a lot of people that are going through it, they wanna do those things on their own, and there's
Right.
people that still do that, you know? Friends of mine now that I know are going through, other types of cancer treatment and things like that, they're still working, right? Like, I think back then, like, I know my dad, like, maybe it was the physical nature of his job, but he stopped working, you know?
Mhm.
Um but now, whether it's with different treatments or different types of, whatever their cancer journey is, people are still working, people are still driving themselves, people are still doing the day-to-day things like running marathons, like, um, so like I think it's a lot different now because people realize that they can do more. So like the caregiver is not just that person. They may still be doing that, but it's also being there physically, mentally, emotionally, um, advocating, going to events like this where, I wish, I always say that one year I'm going to bring my dad with me, but, um, just seeing the community that's out there.
Yeah.
And there's so many events, right? There's, just a few weeks ago, I participated in like a cycling fundraiser, and that was like an awesome event. My legs did not like it for like 3 weeks after, but it's just there's so much going on, and being a caregiver is just being a support system um, for that person that's going through it and for other people.
You talked about not really feeling prepared. And I think that there's, God, like you said, like there's so much that can be considered caregiving and like providing support. Were there moments that you just felt like you didn't know what to say or what to do?
Yeah, I think a lot of moments, right? So, um, you always want to tell people it's going to be okay, or you're going to get through this, you're strong, things like that, like all the uplifting things that you think they want to hear. But unless you're the one that's actually going through it, sometimes maybe you just wanna hear that it's okay, that you're scared too, or, you know, um, they just want you to just listen and not even have to say anything, right? There's again, so many emotions that people go through on both ends, right? So as a child, as a caregiver, as a family member, as, a friend. So I think it's hard sometimes to really say, this is what they want to hear because you really don't know unless
Right.
you listen.
Yeah. And that's a huge part of it is the listening. I think that's something we've heard in a few of our episodes is just, the listening and the communication piece of it is so, so key. Um, while you were going through this, how did you balance staying strong for your father, but also processing your own fears and concern?
I tried to stay busy, selfishly, like thinking about it now, like I felt like, okay, if I don't think about it, it'll just go away.
Mhm.
And again, I was still young, so I was still trying to like go out with friends, to bars or vacations, things like that. And now that I'm older, I'm like, I wish I was around a little bit more. In the sense that like maybe I never took him to like any of his treatments. I never went with
Mhm.
him. Not took him, but like, my sister was at like every single one of his appointments. I wasn't. They were like, "Oh no." And I think part of that too is, like, I'm the youngest,
Yeah.
I'm the only boy, um, and I feel like my parents just, like, in a way, wanted to shelter me because I was the youngest, I mean, I still consider myself an adult, right? I was in my
Right.
early 20s, but, like, I've always been the baby of the family, so I think they were just like, "Okay, you keep doing what you're doing, like, dad's gonna be okay," um, so that's kind of what I did, but
Yeah.
I wish I hadn't in a way. I mean, it was good because I probably was sheltered from some things. So in a good way, maybe it
Yeah.
was, but um, I kind of wish I was there a little bit more. And
Yeah.
I think that's like some of the guilt I feel now, especially
Mhm.
because of how involved I am.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, I probably should have done that a little bit different.
Mm. And I want to talk a little bit about as well. Um, did your family like openly talk about the fear and uncertainty? Or was this something where, obviously there's addressing going to the appointments, things like that, but just the emotions that come with it all. Was that a conversation?
Not really. Um, Again, maybe it's a European thing. Italian, Portuguese, those types of cultures, especially if you're a male, it's like they kind of don't want you to talk about your feelings and stuff, right? It almost is like a sign of weakness. So I think that part of that was going on. Um, but again, it goes back to that whole like privacy thing,
Yeah.
I just feel like we didn't really like publicly announce. I mean, people would see us at like family functions or, events like that because it's not like he stopped living his life, but
Mhm.
it's there was no social media, right? There was no Facebook to be like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
my dad's got cancer," or things like that. So unless you saw him, you didn't know what we were going through, and it's not like we were openly I'm sure that my relatives in Portugal knew, but,
Mhm.
like, again, they were once a month phone calls, "Hey, how are you?" "Oh, we have this going on," maybe, like,
Yeah.
but I don't even know if they knew,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I think mm, absolutely. Uh, I'm half Chinese myself, and I think that's very similar in Asian cultures as well, that you're not necessarily getting into the emotions of some of these experiences. So, um, I do want to talk a little bit about what you felt like actually made a difference as far as providing support during this period of time. Are there things that you would recommend to others? I know we talked about listening, but um, as far as like what you feel like is always sort of supportive.
I think especially nowadays, you know, getting involved in like it doesn't necessarily mean you have to show up to like every single event out there, but there's so many great organizations now. Fight CRC obviously being one of them. That's one that um organically and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about my journey through champions and stuff, but how the involvement with Fight CRC became, one of my primary focuses. But there's also other groups out there like Man Up to Cancer,
Yep.
which they're doing great things, for males out there because again, it's that stigma that males don't have resources available. Like guys won't talk about their feelings. I feel like more and more people are now, but like you know, guys don't hug each other like back then. Like my
Yeah.
dad never went up to his friends and hugged them and stuff. And I feel like now it's okay. Like I
Yeah.
can't tell you, I've been here in DC for one day, and the amount of male hugs I've given out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like now I feel like it's a lot different. But getting involved, it kind of keeps you active. It keeps you with your people that understand, but also people that support and, like I said earlier, listen.
Yeah. On the other side of the coin, are there things that um, people maybe do that, even if well intentioned, are not really the best suited in times where you're trying to give support?
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't go through this, but I see it now sometimes because like I try to reach out to some people and I realize that everyone goes through things differently, right? Like you wanna I think people's first intentions now are like, let me get you guys dinner or let me bring over dinner, and it's like that can be overwhelming because you're getting it from so many people like
Right.
wanting to like buy dinner and people think that that's like what they have to do. Um just show up or just, hey, can I come over and spend some time with you? You don't have to bring anything, right?
Yeah.
But like just being there for the person. So I think that's like a common thing that I notice and I do it myself. Like I'm always
Totally.
like I do it to people and I'm like, wait, what else can I like do, to be there for that person? And I think also like people always want to like assume the best and be like, you're gonna get through this. And like maybe that person doesn't need to hear that. You know what I mean? Maybe they need to process like that maybe it's not going to be okay, and what is that going to look like, right? Like, um, I think, this year has been a tough one for me personally because I've lost a couple people that I've learned that they were going through this journey, and I've gotten close to them through like my advocacy.
Yeah.
And one in particular stands out that, like, she kind of, I think, was already accepting, and she didn't let the fact that her outcome was going to stop her from advocating as much as she did. And to the very last day, like, she was doing it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate your openness about this because it's hard. There is no, I think, like, easy way to discuss things like this. And um
what if I can actually,
yes.
one other thing that just comparing it to other people's cancer journeys too, that's one thing. And I'm like, it's great that your second uncle had, colorectal cancer 5 years ago, but you know what? I know people that had stage 3, like my dad, and they're not with us anymore. And I know people that are stage 4, and they're, you know, like my dad, 20 years, and he didn't have stage 4, but like people that are still living, and then
Yeah.
people that like get diagnosed with stage 4 and then like 2 months later they're gone. You know what I mean? So like everyone's cancer journey is different, and I just feel like people have a tendency to like they think other people want to hear it, and it's great to talk about other people's experiences, but like I think there's a time and place for it. You don't automatically have to compare like, oh, my, so and so went through cancer, so I know what you're feeling like.
Yeah.
You really don't know what that person's,
Right.
feeling like. So
Absolutely. And what did your dad appreciate, you think, the most during treatment?
I think just the fact that we were there with him, again, for him, it was a little bit different. I feel like because even though he was stage 3, um, he probably didn't fully understand what was going on. I don't want to say that my sister was selective in what she told him because again, it's his life, but like I think probably he just didn't understand certain aspects of it. I think he definitely understands the severity and that, if treatment didn't go as well as it did and his body didn't take to it, that he probably wouldn't be here, right? Seeing all the grandchildren and stuff that he has now, because at that time, I think he only had one grandchild and now he's got a total of seven, you know? Did I
Yeah.
do the math right? Yeah, seven. So it's like I think he appreciates that we were just there for him,
Yeah.
because it goes a long way. Because
Absolutely.
it could break a family, right? Like, both
Yes.
financially, emotionally, like, people don't always react to it the same way. Like, there's people out there that they totally, I mean, people get divorced over it, people, lose touch with friends and family and stuff like that, and I don't think there was any relationships that were broken from him going through treatment, which can't be said of a lot of people.
Right. Absolutely. It's You touched on this maybe a little bit, but curious about um how important it is to just have consistency versus grand gestures.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that what I just said about family and like no broken relationships, right? Because like I especially like if somebody's cancer journey is long, right? People are so quick, like look at the GoFundMe's that always get started, right? The initial like boom, it's like, oh my God, it went from 5,000 to 10,000 in one day, but 10 to
Yeah.
20, like, so it's like everybody's coming out all at once. And then as your cancer journey gets longer and pushed out, instead of weeks, it's months, and months, it becomes years. Like, how many people are still reaching out to you and, stopping by and seeing, or do they go back to their regular day to day, Um, so I think that's a big thing, for a lot of people, friends of mine that not even colorectal cancer, but just like friends that, their wives, have been diagnosed with breast cancer, or, other people that relatives of theirs, and it's like, are you still showing up? Are you still checking in to see how they're doing? Um, like a friend of mine, his wife had breast cancer, and I felt like we just went about our business. And so the other day, like I messaged him, right? Because you're always in group chats with friends and stuff. And I just messaged him. I'm like, hey, by the way, like I've been meaning to ask you, like, how's your wife doing? I know it's been a little over a year, right? How is that looking? Because the big target is getting to 5 years and beyond, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the big thing. Um, but just checking in with people consistently and not just when they get diagnosed
Right.
or when they have surgery.
Yeah. And who were you supported by during this time?
Um, I mean, my friends, like I had two really close friends. So, like, but again, they hadn't experienced that, I think. So it was maybe a little bit different for them, how they felt like, I didn't really like go out of my way to like talk about, like, hey, here's how I'm feeling, or, this is what happened to my dad today, like, as far as treatment goes or anything like that. So, like, I think they were just there if I wanted to talk about it.
I want to talk a little bit about how your father's diagnosis changed how you approach your own health. Um, has that changed anything about the way that you go about taking care of yourself?
It definitely has. Obviously, been a colonoscopy enthusiast since I was 30, right? That's what I like to refer to it as. But um, in my 20s, I don't know if it was work related. I have a lot of anxiety. I've always kind of had it. So, like, I get a lot of stomach aches and stuff. So, I felt like at that time, maybe it was a stressful job I had or what, but I was just not feeling well, right? Stomach issues. And so I think I pushed, especially the fact that colorectal cancer ran in my family, it automatically raised a red flag. Well, hey, we should probably get you checked out. Your dad had it. Yes, he was older, but maybe we should start getting you checked at 30. Because at the time it was, people under 50 didn't really get
Right.
checked. Now it's 45 and really should be a lot sooner. But so when I turned 30, I had, my first colonoscopy. They did remove some polyps. Um, but again, had I not had that family history, probably wouldn't have gotten it, and who knows what those polyps would have become at the
Right.
time. And then I was going, every 3 years. And this actually happened a few years ago where the doctors are like, "Hey, it's been, I don't know why my doctor did this, but he's like, it's been, you've gotten it every 3 years for the last, 9 years." And he's like, "Your next one, we can wait 5 years. Like, I think that'll be okay." And I was like, didn't totally sit okay with me. And I was like, well, I don't know. So then at the end of year three, so it was like three plus a little bit, I had met my deductible on my insurance plan,
Yeah.
and it's like December 1st or something like that. And I'm like, I, I've been feeling okay, but like, I don't know, something just didn't sit right. Right. So I called him and I was like, and he's like, well, are you feeling anything? And I'm like, yeah, kind of, because I knew in a way, like, unfortunately, like, I don't advocate lying, but like sometimes like they need to hear, yes, there's something.
Yeah.
So he's like, let me see what I can do. But really in my eyes, I was like, it's been 3 years. I like the 3 year, every 3 year just to make sure I'd met my deductible. So I knew I wasn't going to pay anything extra out of pocket.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, he was able to get me in. And wouldn't you know, he found more polyps. And I didn't have polyps for 12 years before that.
Yeah.
So he was like, well, I guess we're going back to every 3 years. So it made me feel good in a way. Because again, had I waited those 2 additional years, what would have become? So I
Right.
think knowing your body it's definitely made me more aware of my body and what is out there that I can, essentially ask to have done.
Yeah.
Not only they won't always listen, but I think if you have a good relationship with your doctor, they can push for it.
Yeah. We are constantly talking about self advocacy and how important it is, and how many of the people who we've had come on the show have talked about how, you know, unfortunately, in many cases, it's taken them pushing back over and over and over again and going to different doctors um, to get, seen or treated or to, figure out a diagnosis. And so I think like this, speaking up for yourself, number one, but also proactive is the other piece I took from this of, every 3 years, like you said, not like clockwork.
And for mine, it's more preventative, right? Because I am overall healthy, you
Mhm.
know? Um, but I cannot imagine, and I hear it so often when, I'm here with people that are going through it or went through it, where they were dismissed by their doctor. Their doctor told them, "Oh, it's just this," or,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's just that." And it's like, you are the one that is in your body 24/7. Yes, I'm not knocking a doctor, but, like, sometimes just taking that extra step, but sometimes they need a nudge, right? So, knowing your body and just, like, if something doesn't seem right, definitely get a second opinion, push for yourself, advocate for yourself, because at the end of the day, if you feel like something is wrong, you really need to, like, find out what is going on
Yeah, totally.
before it's too late.
Exactly. And I want to come into talking about your work now. So, what gap did you see in the colorectal cancer space that led you to founding Champions for Colorectal Cancer?
So it started as a conversation with a former manager who became a friend, Eric. We worked together. As we were working together, he learned that my dad had colorectal cancer. His mom was a stage 4 colorectal cancer patient.
Wow.
His dad was also, I believe, stage 3. So, like, he had it on both sides of the family, right? So during COVID, we're both big golf advocates and enthusiasts, and so he calls me one day and he's like, "I want to do a golf outing," and I'm like, "Well, that sounds cool. Like, I like golf, right?" And he's like, "But like, I kind of want to like start a charity, a nonprofit," and I'm like, so we started brainstorming, and that's when we were like, okay, maybe we do one for colorectal cancer, right? We had another coworker at the time that wanted to do it more for generalized cancer. But like after speaking with Eric, I'm like, no, we both have colorectal cancer in our families. And, I don't know about you, but like I don't talk about it with like friends openly, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know Fight CRC at the time, right? So that's kind of what started the initial conversation. And then we started looking at, well, you know, what does Connecticut look like? Is there an organization in Connecticut? You know, Again, we started doing some research. We came up with Colorectal Cancer Alliance, the coalition. We actually had exploratory calls with them just to see, like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. And then we were like, well, you know what? I think we just want to kind of do it on our own, and really the our mission became, and it still is, to educate the younger generations, because that wasn't really going on. I feel like the last 5 years, you know, with a lot of the like celebrities that have been passing away,
Mhm.
Chadwick Boseman, James Vanderbeek, Catherine O'Hara, countless of other celebrities that are now, you find out not necessarily when they're going through it. I mean, James Vanderbeek was going through it, and
Right.
I don't know if you know this, but he's actually also was born and raised in Connecticut.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So it's becoming more prevalent, and I think people are realizing it's okay to talk about it because it's affecting people, right? I mean, it was
Mhm.
just announced this year that it's the number one cancer killer in people under the age of 50. You know, Statistics a few years ago were saying by 2030 it was going to be. Here we are in 2026, and it's already here.
Yeah.
It's what we're doing, right? So I think that going back to when we started it, it was just like, okay, we need to educate. Yeah, we want to raise money and hopefully find a cure. But like we need to really educate people the importance of getting screened for it, because if you catch it early, it's a lot more preventable,
Yeah.
so.
Absolutely. And why has building this community been so specifically important to you?
Well, I guess, for many years, and again, I mentioned I had two older siblings. So not my oldest sibling, but the middle, my sister Christina, she for many years after my dad's cancer diagnosis was doing Relay for Life. She started, a group that originally I think like thinking back, we was just looking at some old pictures and it was like a group of just like family members, right? Like 8 to 10 people, and we do our laps, and stuff like that. And then it kept growing. It was called Angels of Hope was our name, and I think we did it for like 10 years. And my
Wow.
sister was like, she won awards through American Cancer Society and Relay for Life for like the fundraising efforts and stuff like that. But when Eric and I started talking, I was like, it's so, like, just cancer, and, like, my dad went through colorectal cancer, and so I kind of wanted to do more, and maybe it was partially, again, I think I mentioned earlier, the guilt that I wasn't more involved back then, but I think that's why I wanted to do it more was because, like, it's important to talk about it, and in a way, even though my dad's still around, I feel like I'm honoring him,
Yeah.
right? And I think Eric feels the same way about like honoring his mom. He was more open from what I understand and speaking to like his group of friends, like college and
Mhm.
things like that, that his mom was going through this until she ultimately, did pass away. Um, but I think for me, it's like kind of like that like pride thing with my dad. Like I'm doing this, I'm advocating, but at the end of the day, I'm still doing it because of my dad. Because if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have met
Yeah.
all these great people and done all these great things over the last 5 years that I've been involved in the space.
Yeah. It's um yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, you hear people talk about breast cancer so often, for example, and colorectal cancer. I don't know if it's a stigma, if it's just that people feel, embarrassed or what it is. But I think to your point, you hear it talked about definitely less than other types of cancers. And so I think what you're doing is so um meaningful and important. And I think I want to talk a little bit about how uh, you create support that lasts beyond that initial diagnosis stage because we've been talking so much about the caregiving aspect, but also just the discussion points of it. So curious, past that, what does it look like?
I mean, we still have work to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, talking to legislators for call on Congress. But um, I feel like until I don't know. I mean, we need to make sure that people get comfortable talking about their bodies, right? To your point, destigmatizing talking about poop and talking about bowel movements and things like that. Um, Maybe again, it's because like you think back to that culture that like nobody talks about bathroom habits, right?
Right.
Um, but it's so important because our bodies, that's one of our ways that our body tells us that something is not right, and you need to listen to your body, right? Like just like people, get panic attacks or people, there's warning signs for a lot of the diseases out there, and people sometimes ignore those warning signs, or they, unfortunately, a lot of times people, it's not even ignoring, they just don't know. They
Right.
don't know that their poop is supposed to look a certain way. There's, a chart that I share and like I remember in the beginning when I shared it on like social media, like some of my friends are like, that's gross. And I'm like, but now like people will like send it to me or they'll be like, hey, do you have that chart? That like it's like literally like a
Yeah.
diagram with like 7 or 8 different types of poop. And it's like I think, like, when people started asking me for it, I was like, "Okay," like,
Yeah.
I finally feel like I'm getting through to some friends, and it may not be for them, it may be for someone else, but the fact that they're even talking about it,
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest in my view, one of the biggest accomplishments that, Eric and I have done is that, we host this golf tournament every year, right? 5 years now that we've done it, but I feel like every year, whether it's right after our tournament or like couple months later, somebody will be like, hey, I finally got that colonoscopy, or I don't know if you knew this, but like I wasn't feeling well, and like, I mentioned to my doctor after playing in your golf tournament, and you know, we've caught colorectal cancer early in a couple people, polyps in a couple people. So
Yeah.
like the fact that like random people that like maybe I worked with and they decided, hey, we're gonna play in the golf tournament. Now they're sharing their habits with me that
Yeah.
you would never talk about that on like the
Right.
sales floor at work.
Yeah.
But now they're confiding in me. So like maybe they view me as an expert in the field, which I'm not. I don't think really anybody, I mean, maybe the doctors and, people that are going through it and stuff, but like I think just the fact that I am a resource to people makes me feel good. Um, it makes me feel like I'm truly making a difference.
Yeah. And that, awareness building and that education, it is so important, right? Like, I think with YMyHealth, I get a lot of health related social media, TikToks, Instagram videos, and things like that. And the number of uh, videos that I have come up, or, uh, images that are just like, I've had diarrhea for 7 years and I didn't know that wasn't normal. Things like that that
Yeah.
just crop up, and you're like, yeah, people just don't know. They don't know, or
They
they're
don't know, or they're
purposefully
too
ignoring it.
busy.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like especially now, like, work, you know, just wanting to we think about travel and work and, like, our hobbies and our passions and posting on social media and what's the newest TikTok trend and the newest song, and, like, we go about our lives and we don't realize, um, what our body's trying to tell us.
Yeah.
Um, it also it's what we're putting in our bodies. Like, I'm not gonna call out name brands or anything, but like a friend of mine just sent me like I think on Instagram like fast food, a particular fast food brand, and it's like an article of like what they're actually putting in, and then you look at the ingredients like back when I was a kid in the 80s, like back then it
Yeah.
was, I'm not saying it was healthy, but it was a lot different, the
Right.
ingredient list back in the 80s compared to what it is now.
Yeah.
There's so many brands like that. Um, and it's scary,
Yeah.
and I think that's what we need to change in this country is going back to, do we need something to be on a shelf if it's not designed to be on a shelf for a month or 2 months? Like,
Yeah.
do we need to be adding all these additives? And that could be a conversation for a whole 'nother podcast,
It
but,
is. So,
um
listeners tuning in, we have another episode this month about ultra processed foods. So, be on the lookout.
And I didn't know that, but
I
see, it was
know.
a perfect transition
Perfect
because,
way to
like,
plan.
I've started to do that in my day-to-day life
Yeah.
because I'm realizing, and not that I'm going out to fast food all the time, but, like, even just the ingredients I bring home, peanut butter.
Yeah.
Like, I've always been one butter brand my whole life, and then I realized I'm like, "Wow, they're getting a lot of ingredients in this peanut butter." And, yeah, I could say natural and organic and everything. Is it really? Peanut butter is simple. Peanuts, water, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, so, like, I've been purposely looking in stores and, it's scary that, like, other countries ban some of the ingredients that
Yeah.
we put in, so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Ab- Everybody tune into this other episode because we are going to go down this rabbit hole. And I think you're so right, especially with American food. Um, it's wild
Yeah.
at the very least. Um, I want to come up with just a few final questions here as we get close to the end about what has this experience taught you as it relates to, you know, fear, grief, and resilience, whether that's through your work or through your experience with your dad.
I think the first thing is it's okay to be scared, right? Especially if you're the caregiver or, you know, if you're the person going through it, right? Um, Everybody again thinks you need to be so tough and be there for the person and not, it's okay to just cry. It's okay to talk about your feelings. It's okay to not talk about your feelings. If you want to just sit there in silence. But it's okay to an extent. You have to process your feelings. You have to get out there, talk to whether, whether it's a therapist or whether it's another person that you met at in Washington, D.C., on the lawn looking at the United in Blue display, you know, um, find who that person is, because it's going to go a long way to your mental health. Mental health, I feel like, is so important. And so many people feel like they have to do this journey on their own or just in their small little bubble. And there could be like a person in like California that you met online that is going through the same thing, or someone in like Idaho or something. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy, especially now with social media, like just how you can connect with people and stay connected. But the more people I've noticed that share their experiences and stories online, the more you might have that person that may not openly have wanted to reach out, but they'll send you a DM or they'll reach out to you that way, find a way to contact you, and you may become their friends. And then you've talked to them online for the last 2 years, and then you decide, hey, we're all going to go to DC this year. I had someone that I was just talking to yesterday, and they're like, I've been an ambassador for Fight CRC, but this is my first time in DC. And
Yeah.
for me, this is my fifth time doing call on Congress. So everybody goes through different things, but like it's okay to be scared, it's okay to feel those emotions. It's how you pull through it in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And your dad has been in remission since 2005, I
That's correct.
believe.
Yep.
So, what does survivorship look like in your family now?
He's living his best life. He's back to he's in Florida. He's been there since 2005. That's when they moved. He still comes up. I mean, he is 85 now, about to
Yeah.
be 86. So he doesn't drive up, but he used to drive all the time. Like, so now we're trying to fly him up more, him and my mom. But like, just living his life. My sister's a big Disney cruise fanatic.
Mhm.
She's been on like 20 plus cruises. She tries to take my parents when she can, and do family trips and things like that.
Yeah.
My nieces and nephews are older, 18, 21, 23, 20,
Mhm.
whereas my kids are younger, 10 and 4. So for me, it's like now my parents are kind of doing what they were doing with my nieces and nephews,
Yeah.
right after that. So like, just I think that's survivorship. It's just living life, whether it's traveling, whether it's writing a book, whether it's whatever it is, you find what that is in your life and you do it,
Yeah.
right? Because life is so short. We're on this earth for such a small amount of time. So make the best of it.
Yeah. I love that advice. And what gives you hope when you think about the colorectal cancer community today?
Um, I've never been one for like listening to what celebrities say and do, but like I feel like the fact that celebrities are sharing their stories, whether it's them getting a colonoscopy, like I think Brian Reynolds like did that, and
Yep.
sharing that, like, because there are people that are influenced by celebrity influencers and things like that. So like it's getting the story out there. It's getting w- uh, you know, the importance of getting things done out there. But I think also just like the work we're doing here, right? Like Fight CRC has grown so much.
Yeah.
From when I initially learned about Fight CRC in a cooking class in Southington, Connecticut. That's where I first had my experience, where I met a former ambassador and former. They actually named a hero award after him, Mike Mancini. I got to meet him at that time, and he had it was COVID, right after COVID, he had a Fight CRC mask, and I was like, I'm starting Champions for Colorectal Cancer. Like, what
Yeah.
is this Fight CRC? Like, it's colorectal cancer. Tell me more, stuff like that. So like I feel like the organization has come a long way um, from that, and just, what we're doing, speaking to legislators, they're finally starting to listen, I think. Um, but the work's never done, right?
Yeah.
Until we can finally say that like young people are not being diagnosed. Young people are not dying prematurely. We're not going to be done until
Yeah.
that is done. But we are making some strides, right? We've gotten the age lowered to 45.
Hmm.
Hopefully, continue to push to get it lowered. Getting just people to talk about their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been an amazing conversation. Um, if people want to find out either more about you or more about Champions for Colorectal Cancer, where should they go?
Yeah, so champions for CRC.com is our website. We have a presence, albeit it's not a huge presence, but
Yeah,
we do repost a lot of Fight CRC's material and everything.
great.
But we're also on LinkedIn, and we also are on Facebook as well too. So Champions for CRC is our shortened name.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah,
again, thank you so much. It's been great speaking with you.
pleasure being here.
And for listeners who are tuning in, we've got lots of colorectal cancer month episodes like the ultra processed foods. So stay tuned for more of that this month. And we will see you next time. Perfect.
Thank you very
Thank you
much. That
so
was
much. This was
yeah, it
amazing.
went
You did great.